Well, this video is the first of a series of videos related to the subject of entrepreneurship. And entrepreneurship, as we know, is extremely important and is responsible for a lot of economic growth, a lot of job growth. And that starts with individuals starting businesses, taking risk, assuming that risk for the intention, or the intent at least, of receiving some type of reward in the future, usually in the form of profits, although there are other rewards besides strictly monetary. So the first thing we need to do, though, is obviously we have some type of idea, and all ideas are not necessarily created equal, right? Simply because you have an idea of a potential business does not mean that you should follow through with it. There needs to be a process in place for how you evaluate and assess the strength of that idea. Unfortunately, many entrepreneurs and many individuals who start businesses do so out of emotion, or do so in a rush to try and turn a quick profit without really assessing the market, the industry, and even the product for that matter. And so one of the things that can be done as a way of trying to lessen the harmful impact associated with starting an unsuccessful business is by completing what we refer to as a feasibility study. Often referred to as a feasibility analysis. A feasibility study is simply designed to assist the entrepreneur in determining simply the viability of the business idea. The very basic purpose is to come to a conclusion, essentially. Either the business idea is essentially a go, or we have what we call a no-go. Okay, and before you realize, obviously, the negative spin on obviously not pursuing the idea, oftentimes this can be just as helpful, because you're saving yourself the time, energy, and resources that you would expend in starting the business without doing a careful amount of research. And that really is what the feasibility study is about. Now, the feasibility study is what we call an objective analysis. Okay, and this is an extremely important characteristic of this type of study, is that it is objective, meaning that it is more than your own opinion. Okay, it is based on actual credible research. It's based on statistics, and that's unfortunately something that a lot of entrepreneurs do not rely on when starting companies. A lot of times we rely on our own opinions regarding the matter, right? Which we can only consider so much. Or we rely on the opinions of family and friends, which oftentimes is even worse, because family and friends will often, lie to us to protect our feelings, which isn't doing us any favors. And so by doing an objective analysis, we get the ability, or the opportunity rather, to get a gauge on the success or potential success of our particular business. Okay, we're trying to reduce those harmful effects of business failing. And so a feasibility study is really divided into a couple of different areas that we include. Usually, in first, you have the product and or the service, depending upon what type of business you're potentially starting. And so we're trying to determine the viability, once again, of that particular area. That's our primary focus in this particular category here. And so one of the things that we're typically trying to do is we identify features and benefits of our products, right? Not only the actual characteristics, so what the product does, but really what benefit does it provide people? What type of value does it provide consumers, right? All products should provide some type of value. The product must solve a pain. Okay, and this is the feeling in the market that is present because your product or service is not in existence. Okay, the pain is very real. The pain is the feeling that consumers have because they have an unmet need, and in some way, shape, or form, your product or service solves this pain. Okay, it's very, very important that you consider that. In the product or service arena, you definitely want to consider competitors, right? You want to consider competing products, what they offer, direct competition, and a host of other things. Outside of the product or service, you also want to consider the market and the industry. And once again, we are trying to figure out viability. Simply because we have a product or service that might work, we have to figure out, is the market, is it large enough to accommodate us, right? Do we have enough potential customers to really make this thing work from a financial standpoint? That's a very, very important subject. And a lot of entrepreneurs, unfortunately, do not spend enough time really assessing the market and determining not only viability, but the size, the strength, competitors, all these different things. This is very, very important that you assess the market and the industry, right? Looking at things like, well, okay, what is my target market, right? What are the set of characteristics of the customer that I'm trying to attract, right? Things like demographic variables, psychographics, geographic variables, all of those different things that we'll discuss in subsequent videos over time. But we're generally focusing on those in addition to a host of other things. In addition to that area, we also focus on the financial viability. And so from a financial viability standpoint, we're typically trying to assess whether or not we're going to make any money. That's generally a very important thing, obviously. We're not necessarily producing significant income statements and pro forma statements and those types of things, but we're just trying to take a look at, basic fundamentals, things like, our revenues, our costs, our earnings, those basic ideas, just to get a quick kind of impression or idea, if you will, about what are we going to earn with this particular venture here. And then we're also concerned with our capital requirements. Right? How much are we going to have to invest? What are our startup costs like? Things like equipment, insurance, different things that we have to buy associated with getting this business off the ground. We're typically concerned with those areas. Now, one of the things I want to mention here real quick is that a feasibility study or feasibility analysis is not the same as a business plan. Okay. These are very different documents. A feasibility study, for the most part, we consider it to be an internal document, meaning that nobody really sees it outside of the company founders. And so it's simply designed for you to make a relatively quick, and I say quick is relative because this does take some time to prepare, and the accuracy of your decision is only going to be as accurate as the information that you gather and the detail that you put into it. So you can, spend, half a day doing a feasibility study and maybe your decision won't be accurate. But it's internal, and so we're trying to figure out if we're going to get this thing off the ground. A business plan, typically, although some people do it before they launch a business, can be done when the business is already up and running. And the business plan usually is used for external reasons. In large part, you're using it to gather funding, right? So you're showing it to potential investors, you're showing it to banks, you're showing it to potential employees, right? If you're trying to hire people onto your organization. So it's rather an external document, and oftentimes it includes more detailed financial statements and some other factors as well that really you wouldn't have the ability to assess unless you were up and running to begin with. So for the most part, in the courses that I teach, we usually conduct a feasibility study or analysis first, and then when a business is up and running, then we gravitate towards actually formulating an actual business plan. So that just gives you the structure of the feasibility study, what's included. What we'll be doing over the course of the next few months or so, at least from the date of this recording, is adding additional content specifically related to those three categories, and what are the specific things that you would consider, what are the important elements to include in your analysis so that ultimately you can make a very, very accurate decision as to whether or not you want to pursue a particular business idea.